Well, good evening. Welcome to this fifth session of Teach Us to Pray. Through this whole course, we've been asking God, teach us to pray. Lord, teach us to pray, just as Jesus' disciples came to him and asked us, Lord, teach us to pray. Because they wanted to be more like Jesus, just as here we're a community on the journey to be more like Jesus. They want to be like him. They wanted to do what he did. And amazingly, Jesus not only taught them to do what he did, but he invited them into the same relationship with the Father that he enjoyed. And that's what we're really learning and asking God to continually teach us to enjoy and to do. You know, they could ask the Father for anything in his name and be confident of receiving it. They could ask the Father for the Holy Spirit, the greatest gift that he wants to give us, his own self, his own Spirit. They could speak to God with the words God had given them in the Bible, allowing them to teach them by shaping and inspiring their own prayers. And they could hear the Father's voice just as the Son heard and followed. And they could be with the Father just as Jesus was always with the Father. And I think of an important moment in Jesus' ministry as Luke describes it. Luke in his gospel especially attends to how much Jesus prayed and how he went back and forth between all he was doing and his times of prayer. And in Luke 5:15 and 16 it says, he had just healed someone. And he told him, don't tell anyone. And of course, what does he do but tell other people? And so it says, despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and to be healed of their diseases. And you know, how often in our lives do we feel like there's vast crowds around? Maybe not literal crowds of people, but vast crowds of thought, of things to do, of needs to take care of. But then Luke says, but Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. That is, Jesus often actually went away from people, went away from the needs, went away from what was good work, what was very good work, the things that God had given him to do. He withdrew from it to be alone with his Father, just to spend time with him, to be with him. And this was essential to his own relationship with his Father, the relationship which he invites us to share too, this withdrawing. It's also essential, I believe, to the power that he had to heal all those sick people, but that's a topic for another time. Today, we're looking at a form of prayer called centering prayer. And this prayer is a kind of withdrawing, a withdrawing to the wilderness for prayer. It's a kind that's not about us talking to God. In fact, it's not even necessarily about us listening to God either, what we looked at last week. It's primarily about us simply being with God. Being with God, paying attention to his presence with us and in us. You see on this graphic again, there's this kind of spectrum, this continuum between different kinds of prayer, some that are more active, more about us talking and engaging and expressing ourselves to God, and more contemplative on the other side, about us not talking, but instead listening to God, or even not even necessarily looking for him to speak, but just being with him. And I didn't mention this last session, but we say contemplative rather than passive. You could say that, I suppose. But because these kinds of prayer are not simply disengaged, we're not inert or doing nothing, but we're attending to God. We're listening to him, or this week, we're simply being with him. Centering prayer is the most contemplative that we'll look at. It's a kind of silent prayer. That is, again, that we're not talking to God, and he's not necessarily talking to us. I mean, he can. God is God, and he can talk to us if he wishes. But we're not looking for him to speak necessarily. We simply want to be with him. We want to know his presence and become aware of it in our lives. But this involves us actually slowing down. and quieting ourselves, being silent enough to become aware of the fact that He is with us, become aware of His presence with us. And that's a challenge for us, isn't it? It's a challenge for us because we're so busy, life is so loud. There's the vast crowds that are around us that are shouting about their urgent needs, the emergencies, the things to do, the things we need to get done today. And so even today, as we learn about this side of prayer, we're going to try to slow down and be quieter. And we're going to practice this a few times, because let me tell you, if you've never tried to do this before, it's not something you simply can dive into and be silent for and still for 20 minutes. And we have to get out of, we have to withdraw. We have to get out of the busyness, get out of the vast crowds of thoughts and needs and emotions to a quiet place, a still and silent place where we become aware that God is truly with us. And so I'm going to give you, even tonight, we're going to give you a few chances at this. We're going to work you up to it. We're going to give you a few times of practice. We have to come inside, so to speak, from the loud outside. Close the door, go into an inner room. Let things settle in our minds and in our hearts. Because this is God's invitation to us. Be still. Be still and know that I am God. God can and does show himself to us in the busyness and all the things we need to do. And as Jesus is so active in healing people, God is so present. But it's also when we're simply still, when we're simply alone with him, that we know. And know that he is God in a way that we don't discover when we're so active and busy. We know that he is God in a different, maybe even a deeper way, when we're simply still and silent with him. So we're going to start with 2 minutes. 2 minutes of stillness and silence. We did this last week, and then we're going to work you up this week as well. So I'll invite you to close your eyes. Again, this is just a way of focusing on God, shutting out distractions. If you wish, you can lay your hands open just as a gesture towards God of, I'm open to you. And we're going to be still and silent just for 2 minutes in our Father's presence. Father, we thank you for your presence with us. How was that? That was 2 minutes. Did it feel like forever? Yeah. There's something to reflect upon. Being still and silent for 2 minutes feels like an eternity to us, doesn't it? That's why we're being gentle with you. We're letting you work your way up to it. Did it feel nice too? Anyone was like, "Oh, that was nice. That was good, eh?" Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Yeah. I find centering prayer such a gift. Because as you as you get used to the stillness and silence, as the 2 minutes, the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, as you get more used to actually being still and silent for that long, you're able to receive it as a gift. And something that I find so life-giving about it is that I don't have to feel like I have to bring God anything other than me in centering prayer. You know, if you're used to always talking in prayer, then it can feel like, oh, well, I have to think of what to say. Are they the right words? Are they fitting words for God? Are they eloquent enough? But what I find a gift about centering prayer is I don't have to bring God anything other than just me. Just I'm here and I'm present and I want to be with you, Lord. And something I want to say in that regard is that centering prayer is prayer. Right? What you're doing is praying. You're not saying anything, but you're still attending to God, being present with God, conscious of God. It's still an expression of our relationship with God, even though we're not saying anything to Him or necessarily hearing from Him. Because communication is more than the words we say, right? You know, my wife and I are both fairly on the introverted side of things. I'm closer to the middle. Val's a bit more introverted. And so often what we'll do in the evenings is we'll just sit together on the couch, and sometimes we're talking together, but sometimes we're just there with each other. And Val calls it sharing space, and I think that's a really lovely way of thinking about what we're doing in centering prayer, actually, is we're just there. We're just with God. We're just sharing space with Him. We don't have to talk necessarily. We're still communicating. We're still aware of each other's presence, and we're still wanting to spend time with one another. You know, I come from a tradition, this tradition actually, Pentecostal Christianity, that focuses very much on the active side of our relationship with God, of being very engaged and speaking a lot and being fervent in our prayers to God. And we're very focused on the high points, where God's presence is with us in such an overwhelming and powerful and tangible way. And that is true, that God is so present in those ways. But for those of us who come from this tradition, I know for myself that can lead to the false conclusion that if we're not experiencing God that way, that He's not present. But that's not true. God is present, yes, when He's so powerfully upon you that you can hardly stand, or you actually can't stand, you need to lie down. But God is just as much present when there's hardly anything you can sense at all. God is just as much present with you and in you in quietness and stillness. And that's another gift I've found in centering prayer, is that, I don't really wonder anymore, which is kind of amazing. I don't really wonder anymore if God is present with me. I'm just as confident He is present when I can feel it in my body, and when I feel hardly anything at all, and I'm just sitting with God. I'm aware that He's present with me and in me. In John 14:17, speaking of the Spirit, Jesus said, "The Spirit lives with you now, and later He will be in you." He's speaking to His disciples just before He goes to the cross. rises again, and that later comes at Pentecost, just after Jesus' resurrection, 50 days. So now both these things are true of us. Not only is the Spirit with us, but the Spirit is in us. And this is an incredible truth. I don't know if you fully grasped how amazing it is that God is in you. He's not just with you, but he's actually in you if you have faith in Jesus. God is in you. And centering prayer is a way of paying attention to this, a way of paying attention not just to the truth that God is in me, but a way of paying attention to God in me and with me wherever I am. God's presence goes with you and is in you. That same glorious presence that overwhelmed the tabernacle and the temple now lives in me. The God who made the heavens and the earth lives in me, in you. Our Father who is in heaven is also in you by his Spirit. So let's attend again to this presence of the Father in us and with us. I'll invite you again to close your eyes. You can turn up your palms towards heaven just as a way of praying with your body, a gesture to say, Lord, I'm here. Maybe take a deep breath. Begin to let go of the vast crowds, the 10,000 things. And you're not going to sleep, you're just settling in, relaxing into an awareness, a consciousness that God is in you, with you. So let's be still. Let's sit with the Lord. Father, we thank you for your presence in us. How was that? Was okay? That feel like more of a forever or about the same? Yeah. Did any of you feel like nothing is happening? No? No one? That's kind of amazing, actually. Okay. Did any of you find it hard to not be thinking about other things, distractions running through your mind? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm going to invite Diane Mantika. She's going to talk about all those things and more, take us a bit deeper into centering prayer. Diane is a spiritual director, actually trains spiritual directors. I'll let her say just a bit about what that is for those who are not familiar, and she's going to take us deeper into centering prayer. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's so good to be here with all of you. So Steve asked me to explain a little bit about what spiritual direction is. A spiritual direction is basically an opportunity to uh, have someone listen to your life with you and to see what's real for you in the moment, in your life currently, and to discern what the invitations and the stirrings and the movements are of God with you in that. To come to recognize that God is with you in your real life and to bring that into a listening presence and into discernment. It could be a time of transition for you. It could be a time that's really challenging. It could be that you're just feeling like your spiritual life is really dry. And so what a spiritual director does is just listen deeply and offer the kind of presence that we're sharing today with God to the person who comes. In a way, spiritual direction is a misnomer because it's non-directive. The director is the Spirit of God with us. And so we're the spiritual director and the what's called the directee, the person who comes. We're both listening deeply to one another and on behalf of the person who comes. And then is also listening with the other ear to God and to just see what the movements are, what the invitations are. So it's different than counseling. It's different than coaching. But there can be overlaps. The only way to move forward is to be present to what is now. And sometimes we want to escape what is now to kind of move forward. So coaching is really more goal-oriented in my experience, and counseling is when there's really something that you deeply need to work on for a while in order to bring healing and to be freed up. And spiritual direction is it's just a great practice for people to have, especially for people in spiritual leadership, to just be able to process and discern and to be tending to their own souls and their own lives while they're offering leadership and spiritual guidance to others. So I hope that it's really good to be here with you at Elim this evening for the opportunity to grow our experience of interacting and communing with God, nurturing intimacy with God through various prayer practices. Tonight, the invitation that Steve already opened up so beautifully for us and in a very compelling way is the invitation to be still and to know that I am God. By considering the practice of centering or contemplative prayer. In the weeks prior, you have spent time considering prayer as petition, where we make our requests known to God, knowing that God hears us and answers us. I hope that you have embraced God's invitation to lay your hearts bare before Him, letting God in on all your concerns, hopes, and desires. You have also considered praying the very words of Scripture and allowing them to touch into your own current experience as a dynamic way of engaging God, who inspired the Scriptures to speak to us today, as much as to those to whom the texts were written originally. And you've had the opportunity to experience prayer led by the Spirit through the gift of tongues, praying in a language that you haven't, that's beyond your own understanding. And this is also a means to listening and perceiving how to participate with what God is up to. And centering prayer also creates space for this. I like to follow my notes closely so that I don't go off on all kinds of tangents. And I need to be able to see them. Centering prayer is a form of contemplative prayer where we enter God's presence through stillness and rest in God, enjoying and resting in this relationship for its own sake. Ruth Haley Barton, in the book that's been referred to you on the references, Invitation to Silence and Solitude, she likens this coming into stillness, known as the practice of solitude and silence, to our interior lives that are stirred up like jars of river water, becoming settled. As we quieten ourselves, the sediment settles, and the water jar that is our soul, our lives, becomes clear and still. Can I have a little bit more light here? Sorry. Just a bit, thanks. That's great, thank you. Silence is the experience of being alone in silence with God, who is the great I am. This experience of loneliness that we often experience becomes transformed by the awareness of God's presence with us, always with us, and coming to realize that we are never alone. We are always in the community of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Contemplation, in our context, is being with God simply for who God is, resting in God's presence, with no agenda other than to just enjoy each other's company. It is spending time in relationship for relationship's sake, enjoying God just for who God is. Jesus, as God's beloved, opens the way for us to know that we too are God's beloved. Contemplation through centering prayer is you enjoying God, enjoying you, just for who you are. Resting in unconditional love, in communion beyond words. It is beholding God, beholding you, beholding God. Psalm 131 describes this experience of contemplative prayer beautifully. It reads, "My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things beyond me, but I have calmed and quieted myself. I am like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content." Israel, people of God, and you can include your name there. Put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. In centering prayer, we let go of distractions so that we can enter more deeply into the awareness of God who is already present within. God, as the Holy Spirit, resides in our very being. We are temples of the Holy Spirit, of Christ's presence. So through contemplation, rather than becoming empty, we allow space for God, for the fullness of the experience in the presence of the Spirit. We let go of the preoccupying distractions that keep us from being aware of what really matters, the things of God, God who is always there to inform what is going on in our current realities. It all matters to God, everything. So we can surrender all of our preoccupations rather than staying caught up in them and losing sight of God, who alone can transform our current reality. There is no objective for centering prayer. It is its own objective. Space for God through silence and solitude. The objective is God himself, who is ever with us, there in every moment, in every present moment. However, there are effects of centering prayer that are manifested in our lives over time, and once we're beyond the prayer time that we're in, such as we grow in experiencing the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5, and the ways of the Beatitudes, as described in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. Often others notice these changes in us before we notice them in ourselves. For example, a spouse, a family member, a good friend may notice we are not as reactive or triggered as we used to be. There's a quieting that happens. What also happens because of time and centering prayer is we gain the ability to discern. Next week, you'll be learning about intercessory prayer. Contemplative prayer, silence, and clearing interior clutter sharpens our spiritual ears and eyes to pray in alignment with God's Spirit. It is a mini fast from noise, and we know how noisy our worlds and our lives are. So you might have just felt that settling of just a wonderful bit of silence away from all that noise, and have a taste for wanting more of that. We are better able to discern God's ways for us and to make decisions that are led by the Spirit. When letting go of distractions and worries, we can hear the voice of the shepherd saying, "This is the way, walk in it. Turn neither to the left or the right, but walk in the way that I show you." The scriptures become alive. We can notice God speaking to us through the word and through the circumstances of our daily lives. Inevitably, as we spend time in silence before God, things do come to the surface that we may have been tending to suppress or to avoid. We may experience memories with associated negative feelings. We can entrust these into God's healing presence. Our emotions are an indication that something matters and needs paying attention to. We may experience conviction. An entangling habit, unhealthy coping mechanism, or besetting transgression becomes exposed and surfaces into the presence of God's light and love. We may squirm with the discomfort when this starts to happen. But in centering prayer, we stay with this to face ourselves in God's presence. This is the way through. There is no better place for this to transpire than in God's presence of unconditional love. God is our divine surgeon. It is God's kindness that leads us to repentance. We discover God as a prodigal father, embracing us as we identify with the prodigal younger son or daughter who is looking for life and happiness in all kinds of unfulfilling ways and places. or the judgmental older son or daughter who is striving for self-worth through self-righteous legalism and keeping the letter of the law to earn favor while missing the Spirit's fulfillment of the law through unmerited grace and love. We come to experience God's embrace of unconditional love, forgiveness, and freedom. So, as a result, we gladly allow our old sin nature to become crucified with Christ, so that our true nature in Christ, the truest self that we are in God's eyes, may take hold in us. This is a lifetime journey, so there's no rush. God's not in a hurry. We end up celebrating the joy of reunion with God, intimacy, homecoming, as our pearl of great price. Ultimately, it leads to the marriage of self-awareness and Christ awareness that conceives and gives birth through the Spirit to transformation into being Christ's image bearers. Each one of you is the only person who can bring Christ into the world through your gifts, through your story, through your circumstances, through your encounters. And this is what it means to be the body of Christ. Each person becoming aware of who they are in Christ, transformed by the love of God through Jesus, and bringing that presence into the world. And this is what it means to bring the reign of God into the world and to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done. Centering prayer or contemplative prayer, like Steve and Val so beautifully already described, is likened to a couple of close friends or an old couple sitting on a bench on a summer evening on the front veranda, simply enjoying each other, no words spoken, just content to be with each other while taking in the scene as it presents itself. Or centering prayer is like sitting together with God on the riverbank, just watching the boats go by. Perhaps in your holy, God-given imagination, you can picture you and Jesus, or Abba God, sitting with you side by side. The river represents your flow of thoughts as a stream of consciousness. Each thought that arises is represented by a boat going by. We're invited to simply acknowledge it, the thought, as a boat going by, without getting caught up in it and just turning our attention back to the awareness of God's presence. Simply turn your inner gaze back to God with you in the silence. You can imagine and probably have experienced and probably have been a part of others' experience of this. I know I have, where as a parent, child, spouse, or friend, the only time you hear from a loved one is when they want something from you, where the interaction is always around agendas and needs being met or tasks needing to be accomplished. And then realizing how much deeper these relationships are when we just be with each other with no agendas for sheer mutual enjoyment. Jesus addressed this in Luke 10 with Mary and Martha. It reads, "As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Jesus and asked, 'Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me.' 'Martha, Martha,' the Lord answered, 'you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Centering prayer is about pursuing that better part, focusing on God's presence. We are meant to be human beings, not human doings. As we spend time at Jesus' feet and deep listening, our doing becomes characterized by the presence of God's life flowing in and through us, rather than by striving, comparing, or frantic busyness. Our active life becomes grounded and rooted in our contemplative life. Both belong. However, we let the Martha part of us, our life of action, become informed and transformed by practicing the Mary part of us, our life of contemplative prayer. And sometimes we need to come to a grand halt just to let our souls and bodies realign. This was the experience of Elijah in 1 Kings 19. He listened for God in a powerful wind, in an earthquake, in a raging fire. But it wasn't till there was just sheer silence that he was able to hear God in a gentle whisper. So what are the storms, the earthquakes, the raging fires in your own life currently? Centering prayer is a means to find quiet beneath the storms, earthquakes, and fires in our own lives, to get in touch with God in the eye of the storm, in our deepest center, through entering silence and stillness. In the silence, as our souls become settled, we can hear from God what we need to hear, so we can be present to life as it is, in the presence, freedom, empowerment, and guidance of the Holy Spirit. So remember Jesus' words from John 10, 1 to 10, about Jesus as our good shepherd. I invite you to consider your own life, your ensouled body, or your embodied soul, your heart, mind, and soul as a pasture, and to consider Jesus as the shepherd of your soul, your inner pasture. And to consider Jesus as the gate and the gatekeeper of your heart, mind, and soul. So are there perhaps legalistic Pharisee-like voices that are trying to quench relational joy and freedom? Are there wolves, perhaps in sheep's clothing? Thoughts that are enticing you to leave aside safe pasture and Jesus' shepherding presence? Perhaps you have been your own gatekeeper and are invited to surrender and trust gatekeeping over to Jesus. Or you may have been enticed to climb the fence, to seek greener pasture elsewhere. And God is the shepherd trying to bring you back into the fold. What would it be like to let the sheep represent your thoughts and to let Jesus be the gatekeeper of these thoughts, knowing which ones to send and ward off, which to tend to and transform, and which belong as congruent with his voice and perspective of what is true about you, others, life, and God. Simply abide with Jesus and surrender all thoughts to him, into his shepherding, sifting, and sorting care over you. In centering prayer, surrendering your thoughts means any sensation, emotion, noise, even good thoughts, any distraction that pulls you away from your focus on your gaze towards God. Examples of distraction could be things like an item that suddenly comes to mind that you have to put on your grocery list, the text that you forgot to send or that you need to be sending, or thoughts about the meeting or visit you are having later. It could also be a bodily sensation. It could be a sudden itch that you experience, maybe on your head or on your arm, or an anxiety in your gut. It could be that your stomach is gurgling or your neighbor is coughing. It could be that the dog starts barking or your phone rings or you think of the need of a loved person. Each of these, you simply acknowledge, surrender to Jesus, and let go of, to deal with later. And then you just turn your attention or your gaze back to the awareness through an image or a sense of God that is current for you and alive for you in the moment. And just leave the distractions with God. Helpful images in doing this surrendering is to imagine yourself laying them at the feet of the shepherd, or at the foot of the cross, or buried in the tomb with Jesus, or on an altar, or visualize them on God's lap or in God's hands. You may be dismayed at how many distractions there are, how many thoughts keep showing up that need to be surrendered. It could feel like the whole time you're just busy with thoughts, surrendering. But this is to be expected. Having many thoughts is inevitable. So don't worry. This is part of being human, and it's normal. This is the reality of our lives being shaken up like jars of river water. So every time you surrender a thought, it is an act of prayer. So the more thoughts that you have and the more that you're surrendering, it's like God is saying, oh, more thoughts being given to me. How wonderful. So it's don't judge your time. Just let it be what it is. The fruit of the prayer time comes later in how you experience daily life, with a growing sense of inner calm and peace gradually creeping in amid life's circumstances. You may become increasingly aware of the presence of the Spirit as your counselor, comforter, and guide. So how do we engage centering prayer? Jesus tells us, when you pray, go to your inner room, close the door or gate, and pray in secret. So if you are at home, that's what you're invited to do. In a sense, as you can do this anywhere, as you learn to cultivate that inner silence where you just allow yourself to be aware that you are inhabiting God and God is inhabiting you, and to allow your focus and your attention to turn to that in the midst of busyness or crowds or activity. So at home, I would encourage you to find a quiet place. You may have done that already as an encouragement through these sessions, where you can go to regularly, where you can pray without distractions, and be sure to turn off sources of noise. Don't have your phone with you, or have it turned off, and any technology. Just shut that all down. A recommended practice is 20 minutes twice a day. This can be worked up to gradually over time, and any amount of time is valuable. It is your intention that matters. Start with what you can. And it's helpful to use a timer to set the amount of time you are committing to, so that you're not constantly looking at the time to see how much time is left. For me, a typical practice is 20 minutes as part of my daily time set apart in starting the day with God. After spending time in scripture, journaling, and prayer, I close my time with 20 minutes of just being in silence with God, of centering prayer. And I use an app to start and end the 20 minutes with a chime. And that app is also on your references. So we're going to try this tonight for 10 minutes. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. We will experience this practice together. And there's something strengthening about sitting in silence with a group. And to know that we're all sharing God's presence together. As we begin, I will play the sound person over there, sorry, I don't know your name, I'm going to play a song for us that will help us to get into the quiet. There will be a chime to start the 10 minutes, and then there will be a chime that ends the 10 minutes. And at the end of those 10 minutes, we'll close with together praying the Lord's Prayer that's in your manual. You'll also have the opportunity to take a few moments to share about your experience, and first of all, to write about it, to journal. Anything that you journal and write becomes strengthened, and it creates room for more of what God wants to continue to convey. So now, as you feel free, I invite you to settle yourself in an alert and relaxed position in your chair. I'm going to join you once I move through these directions with you. With your back straight, with your feet on the ground, on the floor, with your hands in your lap. And you could have your palms up to indicate receptivity, or you could have them down to indicate surrender. Just have them comfortable in your lap. And allow yourself to become aware of your breath. Consider that each breath is a gift from God, the giver of life. You may want to take a few deep breaths, being conscious of the infilling of God's Spirit and allowing the exhale to be a release of what needs to be let go of. And it's helpful to choose a sacred word, just a simple word, something like, you can use whatever word comes to mind, but something like Jesus, Abba, beloved, healer, creator, spirit, compassion, mercy, gracious one, whatever comes up for you. This word serves as a compass to orientate you to true north, to God's presence, and to turn you back to the awareness of God's presence whenever getting distracted and going off course. So if you're getting caught up with the boat going down the river, the thought, and it's taking you away into the future and into thoughts and concerns that are not for now, while you're just being in God's presence, that word is kind of like a way to just steer you back into just being with God. So it's not the word itself, it's the intention of turning back to God's presence. After our prayer time is over, just allow yourself to gently bring yourself back into the room and quietly offer a prayer of gratitude for being in God's presence, for what has been surrendered and let go of, and that Christ's presence is continuing with you as you go into the rest of your evening. And you'll have a few moments to journal. So I'm going to come join you. So again, we'll sit in silence for 10 minutes. We're going to start by hearing a song that will invite us into the stillness. And then there will be a chime to start the 10 minutes, and there will be a chime to complete the 10 minutes. And then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. On page 5 in your manual, let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, may your name be kept holy. May your kingdom come soon. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today the food we need, and forgive us our sins, as we have forgiven those who sin against us. And don't let us yield to temptation, but rescue us from the evil one. Amen. Just take a moment to write in your journal something of what's present for you, what that experience has been like, and just name whatever is turning around for you right now and wanting to be named. Just write it down in your journal, and we'll take a few moments to do that. And following that, you'll have the opportunity to share, if you'd like to, something of your experience. You might have some questions. So just take 2 or 3 minutes. Just take another moment. Okay. Would anybody like to share something about what that was like for them? What is your name? Murray? So Murray was saying that the last 10 minutes felt shorter than the first 2 minutes. And his word was surrender. And that as he moved through the prayer time, he didn't need to use that word anymore. He just kind of settled into the silence. And then towards the end, there was a sensation of a pressure on his chest, not an uncomfortable one, as I gather. And it's really important and valuable to feel the feelings that we feel in our bodies, because everything that we experience in life and of God, we experience it in our bodies. So even if we're getting memories, it's because there's something showing up that's in our body now that needs to be paid attention to. So it's beautiful that you notice that. And you become more and more aware of your bodily sensations as you enter into this silence, and to listening to the messages that your body is trying to tell you too, messages from God through your body of what to pay attention to. So thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. What is your name? Pat. So Pat was saying that she has experienced this many times as a way of just an experience of just becoming really still or being in nature and becoming completely quiet, with a sense of communing with God through nature and in the silence. And the beautiful thing about these practices is we're giving them names to help people to learn them, but the essence of them are something that's innate to us, and something that's we're being invited to cultivate and to develop. And these names help us to just honor that there is these opportunities like Pat just described, and that many of you may have described through your years and through significant times, or maybe even regularly. So thank you, Pat. Maybe one more, and I'm wondering if there's any questions. Thank you for sharing that. What's your name? Larry. Larry was saying that he felt kind of a weakness and a trembling, and then also reflected on how it's in nature for him that he really can experience this kind of quiet and solitude readily, and it's a little more challenging when you're sitting with a room full of people that you're maybe not all that familiar with. So there's two sides to the doing it with people. Part of it is you get strengthened in the silence, sharing it, and the other part of it is if you're longing to just be in some time of solitude and alone in nature, then maybe that's an invitation that God is inviting you to consider as a way to even be present to this trembling and this weakness. And maybe your body is starting to show some things that you just are able to bring into rest and to stillness and to healing. Maybe a lot of stress, or I don't know. You and God know, but I invite you to just pay attention to that too. So this was a real gift to share this with you. And I hope that the taste of what you received tonight will give you a taste for more. There's a lot of practices that you're learning, so you can see which ones you want to really start moving into more as that feel like they're calling your name at this time in your life. But all of these are good tools. I learned this over many months, and then also on retreats where we do this for 5 or 8 days at a time. And so we really just skimmed over the surface of so much that could be delved into around just contemplating what the invitations are with this. But I'm so thankful that Pastor Steve opened the opportunity for you to experience this in our noisy world, in our noisy lives, in our noisy minds, and even sometimes in our noisy places of worship. So this is a wonderful, just a new way of just honoring that God really is with you all the time. So thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Diane, so much. Ooh. That is okay. Yeah, I've come to find this just an essential practice for myself. Being in ministry. You would think pastors are like monks, but we're not. We're hives of activity. And it's essential just to, instead of diving into the 10,000 things, to be alone with God and notice His presence to you as you're serving so many others. And even if you're not in spiritual leadership per se, you have many people, cares, concerns in your own hearts and lives, and to attend to God's presence with you in the midst of it is so important. So your homework this week is to do what we've been doing. Take some time each day, 5, 10, 20 minutes in centering prayer. You'll see some further resources there. There's an online resource called The Method of Centering Prayer from Contemplative Outreach. It's a little pamphlet with a lot of practical tips, insights, guidance around this practice. There's a couple books there from Ruth Haley Barton that Diane mentioned, Invitation to Solitude and Silence, and from Thomas Keating, Open Mind, Open Heart, if you're a book person. And then we both use this Centering Prayer app. It's kind of essentially a timer app, but it does also allow you to open with, say, a verse or a prayer, and to have a prayer that pops up to close your time as well. So I invite you to use that. Next week we're looking at intercessory prayer. We're kind of jumping from the most contemplative to the most active side of prayer, but there's a reason for this. One of the great gifts of prayer is that we can actually love other people by praying for them. And this is intercessory prayer. Very simply put, while petition is praying for our needs, intercession is praying for others. Jesus again teaches us how to pray by modeling intercession for us, as with every kind of prayer we're looking at. In fact, one of the very last things he did was to intercede, to pray for his followers before his death in John 17. And because Jesus rose from the dead and still lives, he lives forever to intercede for us with God on our behalf. But amazingly, we not only enjoy the benefits of God's intercession for us, of Jesus' intercession, but he actually invites us to take part in his intercession for others. Through the Spirit praying in and through us, as we learn to listen to God's voice, as we become aware of his presence, his intentions, we can come to pray God's prayers for others. That's the connection between last week and this week and next week. That as we slow down, we hear God's voice, we become aware of him and what he's doing and his presence, then we can pray for others the very things that God desires for them. And so in this way, we play a role in what God is doing in the world. Our prayers can actually begin to shape history and shape people's lives, and that's the power of intercessory prayer. So we'll see you next week for that session. Let's close in prayer before we go. Father, thank you that you invite us to simply be still and know that you are God. To simply be with you, to simply enjoy your presence, your love, your grace. So God, I pray for each of us, God, that as we go into busy lives and worlds, God, that we would hear your invitation to be still, to come into the inner room, to close the door, just to pray to our Father in secret. For there is our treasure and our reward. In Jesus' name, amen. Good evening.